Okay, why don't we get started? Good afternoon now, everyone. I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and I hope everyone is comfortable today. 2020 going out with a bang with a nice nor'easter to give us some snow shoveling to do. I was out there earlier myself, and it's not easy as you get older, I'll tell you that. But anyway, I hope you're all feeling safe and healthy. And thank you for joining us for doing business with Comcast, a program in the Pacesetters, larger Pacesetters program that we launched back in August. That is quickly becoming one of my favorite series because, frankly, I just learned so much about the ways that different members of our business community not only practice procurement, but the degree to which they're committed to the broader objective of the Pacesetters program and expanding their engagement with businesses of color here in Massachusetts. So it's a great series, and I hope that those in the audience will continue to attend. We've heard from a number of different companies in different industries: Gilbane Construction, the Red Sox, John Hancock, and today featuring Comcast. We hope this series brings transparency to the way that different companies and corporate entities do business. One of the things we heard from the supplier side, the businesses of color, is that sometimes they don't know where the door is. Sometimes it's a mystery. How do you find out when RFPs are coming out? What are the requirements? What kinds of things do these companies buy? How often do they buy them? How do I get in the door? So that's what this series is all about. And I'm sure that we'll learn more about the way that Comcast thinks about this during this session. The big goal is dealing with the racial wealth gap. And we know that there's many factors in dealing with the racial wealth gap, but procurement is an equity tool, and it's something that the business community can focus on towards that bigger goal of being an inclusive economy. So that's what this is all about. A few notes before speaker introductions, and a big thank you, not just today, but for all of 2020, for the support of Eastern Bank and John Hancock, who have been sponsors of the Pacesetters program and our equity initiatives and series like this. It's meaningful when companies decide that they want to, go that extra mile and sponsor programs like this in a visible way. So thank you, John Hancock. Thank you, Eastern Bank, for all you do in the Greater Boston business community. This webinar is being recorded and will be presented and shared on the Chamber's YouTube page shortly after the presentation. We will have a Q&A period, so use the Q&A feature and make sure you send it to all panelists. Or if you'd prefer, you can email questions to chamberprograms@bostonchamber.com. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I'm pleased to introduce the speakers today. First, we're joined by Chad Burrows, Senior Director of Supply Chain and Procurement Operations at Comcast. Chad oversees the supply chain and procurement operations for Comcast Northeast Division, headquartered in Manchester, New Hampshire. Chad has been at Comcast for 24 years, so I'm guessing he's seen some changes over the years, serving in management roles focused mostly on the operations of Comcast. He has long been a champion of the diverse supplier community, serving in the past on the board of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council and as an advisor to the Center for Women in Enterprise. Thank you for joining us today, Chad. Next, we have Dr. Jay Burks, Director of Supplier Diversity. Dr. Burks is responsible for implementing policies and procedures at Comcast to increase opportunities for minority-owned businesses in procurement. He has a combined 20 plus years of experience in sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, supply chain management, procurement, and general management. Jay, thank you for joining us. Finally, we're joined today by my friend Mark Riley, Senior Vice President of Government and regulatory relations at Comcast, and an active member, I might add, of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Mark oversees all government relations, public policy, community relations, public relations, local franchising, and state legislative matters for Comcast in over 10 states where the company operates, including the entire New England region. Mark brings more than 20 years of cable industry experience to this role, holding various government, community, legal, and public affairs positions with Comcast and some of its predecessor companies. And I'm old enough to remember some of these, Mark: Continental Cablevision, Media One, and AT&T Broadband. Mark also guest lectures at BU's College of Communications. Three great presenters. Thank you for making the time to be with us here today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to get us started.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim. And, let me start by saying a thank you to Jim Rooney. Jim's leadership of the Chamber has led to us having a program like the Pacesetters. If it weren't for Jim saying, this is important, we need to make a difference in the community, and we need to work together on this, Jim was gathering all of the right players among the Chamber to say, this is important work, and it's not going to just happen unless we do something about it, unless we have focus on it and we work together. And importantly, we learn from one another. How do you go about succeeding in this space? And for Comcast, we've been at this for a long time in terms of focus on diversity and inclusion. But I want to talk not only about what we've done, the rear view mirror, but where we're going. And today is all about trying to figure out, how do you do business with Comcast, and how might some of you who are joining us here today learn about the way in which we purchase, the kinds of things we purchase, and how you might do business with us as we move forward. So if you look in the rear view mirror for us, we've got a good story to tell in terms of being recognized as a top supplier for diversity in our purchasing, being recognized as a top company when it comes to diversity. And that focus has in the past been on our hiring, on our talent development, on the programming that we offer to our customers, on the impact we have in the community, and whether we're supporting nonprofits in the community that are helping the diverse community grow, succeed, and thrive, as well as purchasing, which we'll talk about today. And I focus on diversity and inclusion. That's what our focus has been really up until this past year. And with the murder of George Floyd, as well as the deaths of Breonna Taylor, as well as Ahmaud Arbery, we've had a different focus. We had a shift. A lot of conversations internally, intentional conversations about what we can do differently to change what's happening in our community and really make a difference. And it's where we pivoted from a focus on diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you saw at the top of this presentation, Jim had up on the screen that this is really about our commitment to a more equitable Boston, and that fits in perfectly with where we're heading directionally. So that means a lot for us in terms of what we're doing in the community as well as with small business. So what we started to do this year is kick off a 3-year campaign where our focus to make a difference for diversity, equity, and inclusion will build on and not take the place of what we've done in the past. So the kinds of programs we've supported in the past, we're going to continue to do that. But what we launched this year was a 3-year campaign to invest $100 million in the communities in which we live and work. And the focus in this program and in our communities is on social justice, on digital equity, as well as small business. And not just any small business, but focused on Black-owned small business, Indigenous-owned small business, people of color-owned small business. So you'll hear today about how we're focused on procurement and how you can play a role in that procurement story. But at the end, we'll talk about one of the programs that we just launched, and there's a opportunity for applications for this program for small business to help those small businesses literally rise up. We call the program Comcast Rise, and you'll hear more about that in the presentation. But at a high level, before I turn it over to Jay and Chad, I just wanted to say not only thank you for all of those who are joining us today to learn a little bit more about how Comcast operates. I wanted to again say thank you to Jim and thank you to the Chamber. We wouldn't have this forum to speak with all of you about the way in which we do business, and hopefully we're able to explain how we do business, how we make our purchasing decisions that could provide opportunity for those who are joining us today. But it's also a learning experience as we hear from other companies how they do it. We're able to expand on how we operate and look for best practices to really rule the day. So with that, I will turn it over now to Jay as well as Chad to take it from there. As Jim alluded to, Chad works out of our corporate headquarters in Philadelphia and oversees procurement for the country. And Chad oversees our procurement for the Northeast Division, not only in New England, but all the way down to Virginia and as far west out as Ohio. So let me turn it over now to Jay and Chad to walk us through the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. So, of course, we're here today to really focus on working with Comcast. How do you work with Comcast, NBC, Universal? So maybe we could get to the agenda slide and we'll walk you through what we'll be presenting today and what we'll be talking about. So first, we had a great introduction, so we won't belabor that point. But we're going to be talking about myself and Jay, our values, our brand, who we are, Comcast, NBC, Universal. We'll specifically be talking about our supplier diversity. We'll be talking about what we source, how we source, tier 2 opportunities, and also our supplier registration portal, Comcast-NBC Uni suppliers.com. It's hard to say that. And then what to be prepared for. How can we help you prepare yourself to do business with us? And we'll have a nice Q&A session at the end as well. So as Mark alluded to, we embed diversity, inclusion, and equity in all parts of our business. And you notice here that whether it's at our executive level with corporate governance, or whether it's within our hiring, inclusion within our workforce, supplier diversity we're talking about today, our programming, Comcast and NBC Universal, lots of programming, lots of film production, the whole thing. We'll be talking about that, but that includes diversity and inclusion. And then Comcast Ventures, that's really investment, the investment arm of Comcast, where we invest our money, who we invest our money with in other companies. And then Mark alluded as well to a tremendous amount of community impact that Comcast does with their philanthropic type efforts. So getting to our brand at Comcast, in our next picture here, and this is a pretty busy one, but our brand at Comcast is extensive, quite extensive, as we look at Comcast Universal. And really, there's many aspects to our brand. Maybe we could just forward on to the next. There we go. Excellent. All right. So there's many aspects to our brand. So I call your attention to this slide here. If you go to the left, the top left, kind of that little box of Comcast with many of our brands there, Xfinity and Xfinity Wi-Fi, and Xfinity Flex and Xfinity Home, Xfinity Mobile. That's Comcast Cable. So that's the company I work in. Now, the rest of Comcast, right? There's quite a bit more to Comcast than just Comcast cable, than just high-speed internet and mobile phone service and the great video service that we have with X1. You go down the list there, you'll see that Comcast owns and is involved in sports franchises, particularly in the Philadelphia area. And then you go to that middle box, and in the middle box there, that's NBC Universal. So we have multiple cable networks that NBC Universal owns and runs. We've got broadcast networks, we've got local media, we have film, and theme parks. So there's five theme parks around the world, and one or two more under construction. So quite a big brand. And then we have our European partners in Sky. Sky is across Ireland, the UK, and much of continental Europe, and offers lots of programming and lots of services similar to what we offer at Comcast Cable. But of course, that's across Europe. And then at the bottom of this, lots of other brands and things that Comcast oversees and runs, whether it's Peacock, our new streaming service, our television studios, and then all sorts of digital media, BuzzFeed and BuzzFeed News. Those are Comcast. And on and on. So quite extensive Comcast brand. And of course, all of these entities, they spend money. They spend money with folks like you. So, we're hoping that gives you a bigger picture of Comcast in general and who we are and what we do. But I'll turn it over to Jay, and he's going to walk through kind of our supplier diversity piece.
Thanks, Chad. The that slide, that asset slide, is always a good reminder of the breadth and depth of our portfolio, and it serves as a map, for lack of a better term, when you're looking to do business with Comcast and understanding the brand, understanding who we are, and understanding our values, of course, as Mark and Chad discussed initially. This slide is just general supplier diversity 101. And, Jim alluded to some of the economic disparities and why supplier diversity is so important. Our mission is to, advance economic inclusion of diverse owned businesses. And what is a diverse owned business? Minority owned, women owned, veteran, LGBTQ, as well as disabled. Within the minority community, it's Asian American, African American, Native American, and Hispanic American. And across all of our supply chain, we look to integrate diverse owned businesses, 51% owned and 51% controlled by diverse owned businesses, diverse owned individuals that I just mentioned. The supplier diversity strategy, we have primary tier 1 vendors and we have tier 2 vendors. And we'll talk a little later about this, but the tier 1 vendors are the direct contractors. I think of it as a GC, if you will, building a house. You have a general contractor and you have subcontractors. Your subcontractor may be doing the HVAC, maybe doing the plumbing. And so we track tier 2 for our non-diverse suppliers and ensure that they are including diverse owned businesses and opportunities. And then you have indirect. Indirect is calculated by, if you're a GC and your subcontractor is HVAC, who's non-diverse, but that HVAC is buying their supplies from a diverse owned business. And for example, 84 Lumber is a woman owned business. But if your subcontractor is buying lumber from 84 Lumber, that's indirect subcontracting for diverse owned businesses. So we look to impact the whole supply chain and make sure our non-diverse primes are reporting tier 2 indirect as well as direct spend. Next slide, please. Our supplier diversity program, as Mark alluded to initially, we've been growing. In 2010, it was about $900 million that we spent with diverse owned businesses. Fast forward to 2019, upwards of $3.9 billion with diverse owned businesses. And when you talk about economic inclusion, That's more than $25 billion with diverse-owned businesses since 2010. I always joke, I used to run the state of Delaware's Supplier Diversity program, and their budget was about $3 billion when I was working there. So we spend in excess of $3.9 billion with diverse-owned businesses. And it's just, we're growing and learning, and it's a great opportunity to remedy some of the economic challenges that diverse communities are facing. Next slide. This is similar to our asset slide, but this gives an idea of how diverse-owned suppliers are integrated into our supply chain. This is an older slide. In Philadelphia, we have the technology center next door to, headquarters one, I'll call it. But the technology center was a $1.5 billion, construction project. And 300 million of that went to subcontractors, diverse-owned subcontractors. So when we talk about tier 2, we're committed to tier 2. But if you look at this chart and you think about the Comcast business model, the Comcast brand, and how do you want to get involved with Comcast, this gives you an idea of strategies to introduce your business into our supply chain. If you think about all the fleet vehicles on the road, you say, hey, you know what? I'm an auto repair shop. Well, fleet needs repair shops, but our fleet provider happens to be a woman-owned business, ARI, that supports all of our fleet and maintains our fleet. If you think about the network, think about the fiber that comes into your home, the cables, the set-top boxes, the remotes, the network, the construction of the network. For example, we have a diverse-owned supplier, a Hispanic-owned supplier, that has a national contract with ensuring our network is running as we're all working from home. Network connectivity is most important. And one of our diverse-owned firms, Hispanic-owned firms, is implementing and ensuring the construction of our network is viable and running. A great story. And this firm is, diverse-owned, like I said. We've worked with this firm over the last few years, and this firm has been acquiring non-diverse businesses, which is a great success story and a testament to when working with Comcast, you have the ability to scale and you have resources to potentially grow your business and buy other non-diverse partners, which is an excellent success story. If you look at our theme parks, construction with COVID has been stopped in some of the, theme parks, but the Epic Universe down in Orlando, Florida, huge construction project. But even prior to the Epic Universe being announced, we had diverse suppliers supporting the construction of the parks, the theme parks. And then you can look at, uniforms. I mean, there's so many opportunities, but you definitely just have to be strategic when identifying these opportunities. And that's why, I show this slide. And just lastly, behind the scenes on the NBCU side, if you think about production companies, Kevin Hart production company, Tina Fey, these are some of the, Hollywood, if you will, opportunities, but we do ensure diversity and inclusion within our production and content. Next slide, please. Opportunities. Now, I share this slide, and Chad will dovetail into regional opportunities, but I'll talk about headquarters. At headquarters, and how do the opportunities manifest? At headquarters, we identify the need. We talk to the subject matter experts, but it's really with a national focus. So if you look at our hardware or software, we buy desktops, we buy laptops, software, you can imagine we have a lot of Microsoft software licenses that we purchase with everyone on Teams right now, office supplies, furniture, but we have a procurement team at headquarters that is responsible for administrating these contracts. But within each procurement officer's responsibility, you'll have subject matter experts come in and help refine that scope. I mentioned the construction opportunity with, the network construction firm. This manifested by a lot of the regions coming in and giving feedback on some of the construction opportunities, and then rolling out the national contract for the construction firm. Office supplies, furniture, call center, the list goes on. And, Chad mentioned earlier in the slide to register, and we'll close with some of this information for opportunities. You go to Comcast-NBCUNI suppliers.com, and we traditionally private businesses don't post opportunities on respective websites. You'll see that within state procurement because it's a regulation. But we'll curate and cultivate businesses from this portal to look for some of these respective opportunities at headquarters. And, to be clear, there's definitely a scale and size, requirement when, working with headquarters. Chad, do you want to talk to something about the regional opportunities?
Sure. So some of the things regionally, whether it's building services, that's a real, clear need, whether it's janitorial or maintenance. And our real estate and facilities team, they have a real tight kind of RFP process, a real tight onboarding process, very structured, which is good. We get into some of these other categories, maybe not quite as structured and not quite as tight. A lot of it's more relationship. So, getting people in front of the right people at Comcast. But whether it's training, consulting, marketing, and also Jay mentioned already, like kind of construction and technical operations, working in our master hub facilities and things like that. But those are opportunities as well on kind of a regional, more specific to Massachusetts and the area in and around Boston. Jay, you want to take the next slide?
What we do as a supplier diversity professional, and I think this can also contribute to some of the strategies as you look to navigate, doing business with Comcast. The supplier diversity professional, as well as all the professionals, data analytics, we look at the data, we see who we're spending with, we see where the opportunities are, we look at the budget, we plan for opportunities in the pipeline and kind of recruit vendors to make sure we have a diverse set of vendors to participate in opportunity. Outreach events, what we're doing right now, and that's how you maintain visibility, attending these events, reaching out after these events. Capital partnerships, Chad mentioned earlier about Comcast Ventures. That is a part of the organization that looks to invest in, diverse-owned businesses, not just diverse-owned businesses, but, entrepreneurs. Lift Labs is part of that as well. Vendor referrals, that's key. That's very key because, if there's a regional vendor that Chad may refer to me to HQ and say, hey, this may be an opportunity to grow within the Northeast Division. So there's vendor referrals and vendor referrals just from other competitors in our space, other MSOs, that's also an opportunity. Capacity building, we do capacity building events. NBCU has an accelerator specifically targeted for marketing firms. So if we have some marketing firms on the phone or the call today, stay tuned because they will be releasing another session of this accelerator program. And then lastly, industry leadership. We're part of several industry leadership groups where we talk about vendors to discuss opportunities of growth, strategies, and plan for success. Next slide. How do we get there? We have some aggressive goals for supplier diversity. And, in Mark's opening remarks, he talked about how we're doubling down in light of all the social injustices. So we've proposed a 4-pillar strategy. And this 4-pillar strategy is going across the entire organization, not just HQ, the divisions, the regions, the business units, et cetera. So at first we look at organic vendor growth. So if you're doing business with Comcast, one of the things that's a supplier diversity's dream is when somebody calls and says, hey, I'm doing business with Comcast and I'm diverse owned, and they're not listed as diverse in the respective, accounting system. You definitely want to make sure, if you are doing business with us, thank you, but make sure that you're recognized as diverse within our accounting system, because that's part of the organic vendor growth strategy. And we want to make sure we look at our supply base and potentially grow. The tier 2 partnerships, we're doubling down our efforts on our non-diverse vendors, not just with spend, but we want to look at other KPIs. We want to make sure the base is set to ensure success of diverse vendors for our non-diverse firms. So the non-diverse firms have supplier diversity policies. What are they doing to introduce capacity building to diverse vendors to make them more competitive? New vendor opportunities. This one, where we work with the divisions regions to identify categories where we can introduce new vendors. And then the last pillar is supplier development. And this is an a component of supplier development, these outreach events, talking to vendor populations and ensuring that they have the tools necessary to ensure competitiveness for Comcast opportunities. Next slide.
So this just gives you a picture of how we source, how we look for diverse suppliers, or how we look for suppliers in general. First, we do some industry analysis. We look at maybe who our competitors using, or some of our friendly companies, who they're using. We look at our different business units, a lot of business units at Comcast, and we look at diverse suppliers that they might be using, and how can we leverage them in other business units. Of course, we consult subject matter experts like the Boston Chamber of Commerce, like some of our other friends and partners outside of Comcast. And then our procurement team, when they have a new request for some type of sourcing opportunity, they're doing all those same types of things: vendor evaluation, they're doing tier 2 work with our prime vendors, and so on. And then our supplier portal, where you have the opportunity to register your company as a supplier, and we get leads, of course, that we then develop into business down the road through our supplier portal. And I'll say it again, Jay says it better than I do, but it's Comcast-NBC-UNI-suppliers.com. I don't know why I have a hard time with that one, Jay. You'll have to help me later. But on our next slide, we thought we'd just give you, the next couple of slides, really, we just give you some ideas of what to expect. First of all, for the most part, if you're going to do business with Comcast, you can expect a legal agreement. Sometimes that can be a relatively long lead time to enter into a master service agreement with Comcast. You can also expect privacy. You can also expect that your information is safe with us, as we, of course, will be vetting you and making sure our information is safe with you. You can expect that we're going to want to see capacity and how much work you can do for us or with us. You can expect there'll be service level metrics built into those contracts, and if possible, companies that can do international business, of course, would be desirable as well. And then on our next slide, some strategies for success. Probably the first one here is probably the biggest. Be patient. Be patient with us as a big organization. It does take us time to dot every I, cross every T. It takes a while. So be in it for the long haul with us. Be in it for the relationship, and that patience can pay off. Also, be unique, right? Try to solve a problem. Be a problem solver. Try to be something that we need. Instead of coming to us looking for what we need, coming to us with a solution already in mind certainly puts people ahead of the line. And tier 2 opportunities, be open to those. We may get introduced to you, and we may not have right now a need to do direct business. However, we may hand you off to one of our prime suppliers and be willing to work with them. Certainly that's a lot of opportunity there. Jay, why don't you talk about the RISE program?
I just want to echo those points too. Tier 2 is definitely a strategy, and I like to say leverage the multiple pronged approach. It's never just like, hey, just go talk to Chad and boom, there's an opportunity. Talk to Chad, talk to Jay. Leverage those opportunities and keep everybody abreast of who you've talked to continue that continuity of the potential of opportunity. I think that is so key, Chad. Is like you said, be patient, and corporations and organizations that manifest the same values that we manifest with diversity and inclusion, and commitment to corporate social responsibility. Those are things that we look for to be consistent with, to support Comcast as well. I think that's key as well, that to manifest the values that we profess. and the RISE program. Next slide. Mark teed this off earlier, and this is definitely one of the great opportunities for the Black, Indigenous, people of color community. It's, the website, which is not on the slide, horrible fumble on my part. It's ComcastRise.com, but if you Google it, you're sure to find it. It really is leveraging our assets. That big asset slide that Chad showed earlier, it's showing that we have assets that we can contribute to make the business community stronger. And we're investing in making the business community stronger and having access to some of the great technology that Comcast Business offers and some of the great marketing that Comcast FreeWill offers to some of the small business community. It's a wonderful program. The details are on the website, but all applicable businesses, please take a look at it, because supplier diversity obviously is, looking to increase spend, tier 2 opportunities, but this is that supplier development pillar that we're talking about. How are we increasing the competitiveness of diverse owned businesses through RISE, through outreach events, through supplier development? And, it's a great program. So I would encourage all to check it out. And, the next slide, I believe, is our closing slide. And, thank you for this opportunity. Chad and I, speaking on Chad's behalf, really enjoyed it. And I think Jim's going to, open it up to questions now.
Jay and Chad, thank you for that presentation. And a reminder, if you do have questions, just use the Q&A feature and we'll get to them. And a couple of questions that, I'll kick off with that stimulated the conversation. And, I'll start by saying that I'm sure, like many national, international companies, you hear from 50 governors, hundreds of mayors, and hundreds of chamber presidents saying, spend more money in my region, spend more money in my state. I'm one of them. So, my constituency is on this call, and, I'm interested in the businesses of color of Massachusetts. And I just want, you hit on this, being such a large sort of company, but in your experience in implementing these supplier diversity programs within Comcast, NBC Universal, the big tier 1 that you talked about, that has to be a big challenge. It has to sort of, I don't know, to a degree frustrate you all in trying to achieve your objectives, particularly at the tier 2 level. But excuse me. I guess the question is, as we think about our program and our advocacy and our constituents, a lot of these tools were helpful. I got past Mark Riley. I got Jay and Chad, who are just the guys I want to be talking to. How do we continue this dialogue about sort of, making sure Massachusetts is on the radar screen?
Well, I think initially, regional procurement is really important. And, the goal of procurement from headquarters is to, maximize value in the contract, ensure we have the capacity. But I think a great strategy, obviously register on the Supplier Diversity website, but you need to get a targeted approach to see who your members are, what industries they represent, and then we can cultivate that talent. So the next, and I'm not volunteering, the region or division for these opportunities, but then you say, hey, Jay, Chad, and Mark, we have a lot of marketing vendors in this space. And then we can cultivate a workshop to talk about some of the marketing strategies that we can help develop. And it may not manifest immediately into an opportunity with Comcast, but it's that supplier development that makes the vendors more competitive. When we talk about marketing, we could talk about printing, direct mail, or, I think that is I like to call it, the cultivated content for supplier development, understanding who your member base is. And I'm sure you may have some retailers in there, some restaurants. I think I did see the list actually. But that would just be okay for the reason, here's some diverse owned restaurants, but that wouldn't be the audience that you would bring into, the marketing workshop to talk about strategies to work with Comcast within marketing and professional services. So I think it's just different levels to refining the target market and then producing the content to make them more strategic to be ready for opportunities with Comcast.
Yeah, maybe a follow-up, because as you know, Massachusetts, it's such a, it's a knowledge-based economy largely. There's a lot of specialized manufacturing. There's a lot of R&D. I'm wondering, as you think about the broad scope of goods and services that you provide, where were you surprised that there's not as much participation among businesses of color? If you were to say to me, hey, Jim, if Massachusetts had companies that did this, we'd be all over them.
That's spot on. That's a great question. It's definitely in some of these, and this is very systemic from, a lot of things, but I think it's really specific with some of those technology areas. If we're talking about our network, if we're talking about, the cloud, and the cloud is just so big, but if we're talking about the network, if we're talking about the cloud, if we're talking about, AI, machine learning, some of those emerging marketing technologies, those are the areas where specifically, diverse owned companies, African-American owned companies, Hispanic owned companies, there's not a huge representation. And that's where we're looking to grow this content to manifest that growth in these respective categories.
Yeah, we're getting some questions in. You mentioned patience as something that I think people do have to have. I mean, they have to. You have to get to know them. They have to get to know you, and the opportunity has to arise. I would add patience with persistence. Don't just go away. I mean, show that you really want to participate. But there is a question about from vendor selection to contract execution. How long does the process typically take when you're going to engage with a new vendor?
So I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I think the easy out answer is it varies. I think it varies by business unit. I think if our corporate procurement team is sending out an RFP, typically we give about a month. Takes 2-3 months to review that, and probably in this 6 to 8 month kind of cycle to sign a contract. If we're talking at a more local level, some of our more local business units, let's say it's some kind of building services, type of thing, that could be a much shorter timeline. Could be a couple weeks to collect bids. It could be a couple meetings over a month, and within 6 to 8 weeks, business being awarded. So I think it varies. But one thing I will say, I'm sure a lot of big companies are similar to us at Comcast, is we do have formal RFPs, and we do have formal contracts that come up for renewal every 3 or 5 years. But we also have a lot of lack of standardization in the kind of contract renewal space too, depending upon the business unit, and depending upon what the spend is. So those are, sometimes there isn't necessarily a formal every 5 years this contract's going to come up for renewal.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more just meeting people, finding out that maybe there'll be a fit, and maybe we can work with them to replace an incumbent, without a formal RFP process. So
yeah, you mentioned some of the opportunities that might be on a local level, and a couple that, as you were talking, piqued just made me curious. You see Comcast vehicles all over the place. The fleet maintenance. Talk about how that's done. Another one that you mentioned was uniforms, and I don't know if that's a national contract or whether or not that's sort of something more regional. Those kinds of opportunities, do you do business for fleet maintenance with like neighborhood shops, and how does that all work?
Yeah, so we have a national vendor that helps us, kind of schedule and manage all of our repairs and inspections and everything we need to do, related to our fleet. However, they use local shops.
Yeah.
That's who they work with, right? They work with all the local shops. Some of them are larger dealerships. Some of them are, just small shops that have 2 bays and do repairs,
Yeah.
as well. So that would be, example of a tier 2 opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we would love, if we had folks in that space, we would love to get to know you,
Yeah.
take you to our Prime. ARI is the name of the company, and that could be relatively easy for you to begin doing business with ARI on behalf of Comcast as a
Yeah.
tier 2.
Okay. Anything else kind of in that family of sort of, they're national, but they're better delivered locally?
One thing I think
How do
would
you
be
do
helpful.
your uniforms, for example?
One thing that might be helpful, Jim, as you think about the map that we showed during the presentation, big map to hit 3.9 billion. There's a lot of purchasing that takes place all over that geography. But if you drill down in that map, take the Northeast Division as an example, New England down to Virginia. You've got one of our markets in that footprint headquartered Greater Boston. Then you've got Western New England. Then you've got the Freedom region based in the Philly area, Keystone region based in the Pittsburgh area, and Beltway based down in the Beltway. In each of those markets, the way in which you're going to run the business is going to vary slightly. And that variation could be climate based, that variation could be population and demographic based. And so as a company, we don't have a cookie cutter for everything. There might be a purchasing deal because we're going to purchase remote controls or set-top boxes for everybody. They're going to look the same across the country, deploy those. But the marketing that takes place in each of those geographies may be a little bit different because you've got a different population. And one thing that Comcast does love is trying out on a pilot basis. How does that work? And can we replicate that elsewhere? So when you think of the 3.9 billion as this daunting task to get to the place where I've ramped up my business to be able to supply a widget for this company nationally, it doesn't have to be that necessarily. There are other things where you can look to on a pilot basis, try out something where you say, I'm able to give you a 5% or 10% lift in your productivity or efficiency or your reach to your customers by deploying my service in this geography. And we do that sort of testing and look to figure out, did it work? What kind of lift did we get? How is that better than the existing person who is offering that good or service? And then things like those kinds of pilots lead to a bigger relationship. You think about one of your Pacesetter members, Marianne Lancaster and Lancaster Packaging. Marianne grew from literally something operating out of her house to a multi-million-dollar operation. And it started with small efforts that really grew. But I agree, the relationship building is a big part of it. And of course, as you're always saying, Jim, the chamber is a good place for you to get to know who are the different people within these companies and network and make your pitch that I could make a difference at your company.
Yeah. And I think the portal, even though, Chad, you can't say it, is a great idea. And, enables people to, say, here's who I am, here's what I do. And, like I've told others, it is patience and persistence. And I'm glad too that you made that point about being unique and solving problems because, you're in the business world and this is business. It's not charity. I didn't there's a big, I'm sure, philanthropic and charitable dimension to sort of the Comcast operation. But we're not talking to the charitable division right now. We're talking to a business division that, and all of us are on the receiving end of that, right? I mean, I want my internet and my television and my phone to work. So you guys have to deliver it and make sure that, all the vendors and relationships can do the job because the customers are depending upon it. It's sort of a circular thing. So persistence and patience and understanding that this is a business is important. The other things, and I wish we had more time to probe these, because some of your programs I wrote down, NBCU Edge, Comcast Ventures, the effort around organic vendor growth, and Rise that you just sort of announced, Mark. You and I should follow up on some of these to see sort of how we can amplify to the extent necessary. Love to sort of spread the word about Rise, for example, and also ways we can think about. It sounds like Comcast Ventures might be an opportunity to get people involved in places that they may not have thought they could get involved in, but yeah, it looks like there's opportunities there for further dialogue if I'm understanding them right.
Definitely. When you think about it, you mentioned when you were going through my bio, Jim, how old I am and how I've been around since.
I try to avoid that because
yes.
I'm generally older than everybody I am.
Well, I remember when we launched high-speed internet, and it was 1.5 megabits. And now we've got multi-gigabit speed. We're delivering in Boston to many chamber members now. The highest speeds are Metro Ethernet. It's fiber-based, and we're not only deploying that at the place of business, we've got a relationship where we're connecting their employees out at their homes. And of course, over the past year, we've seen the need for high-speed broadband in the home grow exponentially. Mm-hmm. But we're never going to rest on our laurels. We've invested $12 billion over the last 3 years. Just 3 years, 12 billion in our network. We're not done. We're always looking to have the network move faster, be more resilient, be more reliable, and offer new services that people need. And so when you think about the technology community in the greater Boston area, in your footprint, there's always going to be a need for us to look at ways in which we can further develop the network and deliver new services or deliver them in a better way. So that's never okay, we're done moment. This is always going to be a continuum. And whenever you've got that kind of changing marketplace, both in terms of the technology and the competitors, that introduces opportunity for people to come forward and say, I can help you with that. I can help you deliver on that mission.
Yeah. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I keep thinking about specialized manufacturing. I can only imagine that all of the things that you guys sort of buy in terms of goods and services, there's got to be times, given the sophistication of your operation, that someone walks in and says, I can't get any of these out of this place. I need 10,000 of these things on Monday. Find someone who can make them, and I need them next week. And it's not like a regular supply thing. It's like a reverse engineer, make this, test it, get it to us because something about the operation. So do you have a inventory of those kinds of manufacturers that can just respond to make this widget for me and get me a bunch of them in 2 weeks?
I'll let Dr. Burks and Mr. Barrows talk about the on-demand manufacturing suppliers.
So I don't know that we have really explored that, Jim. You're like kind of blowing my mind here. I don't know that we as a company have even thought this through. Generally speaking, right? We do have, a lot of manufacturers, right? mostly making things overseas, obviously.
Yeah.
However, those things happen, and we do get stuck in pickles. And I'm not sure we have kind of explored those opportunities of, doing things maybe closer to home.
Yeah.
That's
It's been something anecdotally, just watching some of the specialized manufacturing operations here in Massachusetts convert during the sort of COVID crisis to making something totally different. I've gone to a couple of them, and they're incredibly sophisticated robotic operations, and investments in large amounts of equipment that I just can foresee that, you could walk in with anything and some of these companies would say, sure, I can make that. But anyway, maybe another conversation to explore. We're almost at time. I want to thank you, for making yourself available, but more importantly, and I'm glad that you got a chance to do it, letting all of us, including myself, know the level of commitment, the level of thought and sophistication around this subject matter of engaging with the diverse supplier community. I mean, it's clear that Dr. J, you're applying all of that knowledge to sort of what you do, and trying to, this can be challenging. Deal with the challenges. Love the tier 2 approach, because that, for a company of your size, that's very important. And Mark, love to follow up on some of the programs that were mentioned, and a continuing dialogue with Comcast, because I do think there's some opportunities, even if it's not. It could be the auto repair shop in Dorchester, or it could be that, if we learn more about what they do and what gaps they see, maybe we can grow something here. As I said, we trade on talented people. We've got a lot of that. So anyway, so thank you all. I want to give a shout out. It's the end of the year to Bea Jimenez. Bea, you rock. Bea organizes all of this, all of these activities, and not only puts these webinars together, but also all of the other dimensions of the Pacesetters program. Only been with us 9 months, but boy, really took hold of this in a meaningful way over the past 9 months. And I want to thank you, not only on behalf of the Chamber, but the entire Boston business community. So thank you guys, and everyone on the call. Have a great holiday season. And, for those of you in my age bracket, be careful shoveling.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.